in the spirits and beverage space. And today it really is their platform to take us through their experiences and teach us what they have to teach us, which is quite a bit about our topic today. So our topic today is creating truly inclusive, equitable, and diverse spaces in the hospitality industry that extends from behind the bar to in front of the bar and beyond, and developing people of color, people LGBTQIA plus spectrum, and beyond. And what I love about this topic and why I think it's really important to talk about, I think we all understand why it's important to talk about, but truly, I think for a long time, it's always been important, but it's come to the forefront as a topic of how we can rebuild our industry as we go back into our bar spaces and move back into what will be, I hate this, but our new normal, right? The theme of Tales this year is Catalyst. And I love that theme because for me, catalysts are the bones from which you build something meaningful. And I love that theme because actually I think what it's telling us is that the catalyst has now worked. And it's time right now to rebuild the catalyst we want to grow from moving forward. And so today we have a series of questions and conversations with these lovely ladies. We have Samara Davis. Samara Davis is the founder of Black Bourbon Society and more recently Diversity Distilled. We have Joanna Carpenter, consultant, actor, as well, artist, and founder of 86 The Barrier. If you don't know about 86 The Barrier, don't worry, you will hear more, and you should. And we have Natasha. Natasha is an award-winning head bartender in New York City, speed rack champion, so on and so forth, and truly worth our time investing in knowing more about her. So I am so excited about having these ladies on board, and I will let them take it away. I think our first question is just let us know a little bit more about you. My introduction pales a comparison to what you actually accomplish every day. So, Samara?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Jordan, for including me in this discussion because this is such an important discussion, as you said. In 2020, this is a catalyst year, just in all things. And so it's really important to have discussions like this. So thank you for including me. I started Black Bourbon Society back in 2016 when I realized there wasn't a lot of direct consumer marketing being done towards consumers of colors. So I come to this industry as a consumer. I come to this industry as someone who frequented bars, who loves whiskey, who challenges bartenders for, this is what I like. This is my flavor profile now. Bartender's choice surprised me. But really becoming to this industry as a consumer. And the more I dived into working with brands and creating events for other consumers, I realized that there was a lack of diversity in its marketing standards and its advertising standards. And through the work that we've done with Black Bourbon Society, we also realized that there's a lack of diversity internally within the spirits brands. And that's how we ended up creating Diversity Distilled at the beginning of this year, actually. So I see myself as someone who finds the holes and really just wants to fix it, So that's me in a nutshell.
I love it. Well, I can't wait to hear more about you in a bit and what you do. Joanna, tell us a little more about you.
Hi, everybody. Jordan and Brown-Forman, thank you so much for asking me to join this party with these rock stars. So I'm a 16th, 17th something year hospitality vet, come from a family of Chinese immigrants, grew up really surrounded by the small business kind of hustler mentality. I am the co-founder of 86 The Barrier, which is a brand new grassroots language organization that I co-founded with Cameron Shaw and our leadership team, Stephanie Ortiz, Nicole Menezes, and Shirley Mejia. And that is just a whole thing. And I'm a consultant. I've worked in on so many different sides of things on either side of the bar, which has been really great. I've always being a female identifying person of color in an industry that is very much a cis white boys club is not, you got to work 10 times as hard, and your ideas are often taken from you. And there's a lot of proving ground to cover before somebody will take you seriously. And I've always been a hard fighter for other women in particular, also the queer community, people of color in general. And, I kind of think of it like the MTA. Like, if you see something, say something. Just cleaner. But yeah, I think that's me for now.
I love it. Thank you, Joanna. If you guys don't know 86 The Berry, by the way, they give free English language classes to folks in the hospitality industry. And I'll make sure to put everyone's tags here in the chat so people can follow. Natasha, tell us a little bit about you.
Hi. So Natasha, bartender from the Dominican Republic. I actually been in the industry for about 10, 11 years. Started from hostessing all the way to serving, to bartending, now managing. It's been a rocky road, but once you get the handle of your car, you're able to handle the road. So it's so far so good. I've been very lucky to fall in the lap of a lot of awesome people in the industry that don't only care for me because of the individual that I am, because they also care about my values and my point of views, and they share their platform with me. So I'm able to, express my super Latina self every day. So yeah, it's all about me.
That's great. That's great. Thank you guys so much. I know it's a time where a lot of people are asking you to do emotional labor and to share about you and to tell, all of your story and help me do the things. So I appreciate all of the openness and vulnerability. The next question I want to ask, I think, is we could probably talk on it for 3 hours. I think in this moment when we're saying, oh my gosh, and all companies are jumping on board to say, oh, here's how we're diverse and here's how we're inclusive, and D&I, should it be its own hashtag, or DE&I, depending on who you're talking to. So I'd love to hear your what you think about the definition of diversity is. What is the definition of inclusion? How are those two related? How are they different? Because I think we're throwing the word around a lot, and I'm not sure if we quite grasp what that means.
I'll start. So I've often said diversity gets you in the door. Inclusion is where change really happens. And so we often we often say words like diversity, and that, just means a mix of women, LGBTQIA, different cultural backgrounds, different races. Everyone can be diverse. We can even be diverse in where we come from within the country. So having representation from the West Coast or the East Coast is just having a variety. And so, companies say they are diverse and they have staff that reflect the diversity of our society. Really, that's when, yes, that's the foot in the door. But the inclusion part is really where change happens. And so when you say, okay, you're diverse, great, but let's look at your leadership team. Let's look at the people, the management team. Let's look who's making the real decisions. And that's often where inclusion kicks in and where inclusion really needs to happen, especially when it comes to brands and even in a bar setting. You can be diverse. We talked about this earlier. You can be diverse. You can have Latinos and African Americans working as barbacks, but do they have a say? Are they included in the key decisions, key marketing decisions, key leadership positions? That's where inclusion really kicks in and counts the most.
And when we're looking at these terms, I think that's a beautiful way to include it. Diversity is the foot in the door, but inclusion is where, we really kind of make things matter. And if we're looking at actually developing inclusive spaces in the bar world, I think of I think it's all interconnected, but I think each one of you come at the bar world from such a different place. So I would say, maybe for Natasha and Joanna, what would you think of if you're thinking of an ideal way of creating an inclusive environment behind the bar? So for people actually working in the bar space, what does a truly inclusive environment look like, or what has it not looked like in the past that you never want to go back to? Either way is a fine way to answer the question.
I think most of us probably have gone through the same situation where, we're women behind the bar, women with a brand, and they often oversee us because we're women or because we're women of color, and they see, oh, let me talk to the bartender or let me talk to the manager, and still happens, but it always feels good when I'm like, hello. But I think the key is, even though, like, when you still have these positions behind the bar, you still have your bar backs or you have your prep person, I think it's very important to include everybody in all the decisions. Per se, all the reunions or all the meetings, they'll have to be everybody. Cocktail making, not just the bartenders, their opinion matters too. The way the service works, their opinion. If without them, without my bar backs or my prep person, I'm just, making drinks and running around like a chicken without a head. So it means a lot what they think about what we're doing. As little as even our dishwasher, like, if he's in the weeds the entire day, then how can we, eventually, like, have a good service, I think all the positions are equally important, even though we do have these, like, layers and tiers that we all seem to have to climb. But essentially, if you don't allow them to be part of it, then they're never going to be able to climb this ladder.
Mm-hmm.
Joanna, that's interesting too, because I think that speaks to what you do with 86, the barrier. So do you have any thoughts on that as well? Inclusive behind the bar. I know you've run bar programs in the past.
Yeah, I have hours worth of thoughts on that. I think it's really important to draw a distinction to what diversity and inclusion is not, and what it's not is stopping at the aesthetic. If I walk into a bar and I see a Latinx bar back and I see a white bartender, I automatically know that place is not inclusive, because and one thing that we fight for at 86 The Barrier is the distinction between, like, the promotion rates, right? So what is it going to take? Like, if your dishwasher wants to be a bartender, what is it going to take to get them there? And a lot of people think that diversity, as Samara said, the foot in the door, that you can stop at the topical, that you can stop with just like, oh, look, we have like a mix of people, but how are you treating those people in spaces that are often owned and operated by cishet white people who are not language inclusive, who are not culturally inclusive? I don't know a single Black woman in hospitality who hasn't been told that her hair or jewelry was too much at any workplace. Right? I don't know a single Latinx person who works in hospitality who hasn't been told that they're spicy. And it's exhausting. It's exhausting for people just trying to, like, live their life and grow in their careers. But it's so important to understand. And Jackie Summers talks about this a lot. And he's actually the person who introduced this concept to me in such an eloquent way so many years ago, which is equity versus equality. Equality is you see a brand ad on the subway and it's got 5 people in it and there's 1 white person and 4 people of color. And that's great because that is equality in marketing. Who is sitting at the marketing table? Who is in the boardroom making the decisions about we should hire a couple brown people and it's going to be a fancy ad for our whiskey? Like, who is doing that? It's usually all white people. And that is where the equity comes in, right. So we need to be able to define the boundaries of what diversity and inclusion is not, just as much as we define what it is, because without the holistic attempt to come at it from both sides, you're looking at one dimension of a multi-pronged lifelong issue.
Right. So much truth in that, so much tea. Okay, I'm gonna let that one sit. But what I will say is, in a lot of conversations we've been having lately inside of Brown-Forman, it's not just about who's at the top, how can we replace people? It's literally, how do we give skills? How do we create pathways? How do we identify and champion the people who need to be there? But it's creating the pathways, letting people know the pathways exist, like making it very clear what we are going to do to offer those people in terms of skills, right? I think a lot of times we think, oh, if we just replace, it'll be all perfect. But then when they don't perform or they don't feel included, right? Because we've never given them the skills to do it.
Because you haven't put the infrastructure in place. These like bars and restaurants, organizations and companies are literally having to realign their very infrastructure to make them safe spaces, because these are spaces built by cishet white people who have never been in a position where they felt they needed to understand cultures other than their own. So it's an entire realignment of the approach from the ground up to any organization, if they're doing it right. If they're not doing it right,
we're talking about behind the bar, but I think what's also really interesting to think about, especially as we are bartenders who are outward facing, bar managers who are outward facing, or brands, from my side, who need both bartenders and consumers to get on board, right, in order to have a business. Smart and others, I'd be interested to know what you think about, like, what is an inclusive bar restaurant space? Like, what is maybe some great things to think about that maybe bartenders or bar owners can think about to actually be inclusive, and or what are some things that say absolutely not, this is a mark against those folks?
Well, I think I want to expand on what Joanna said too, and I think the inclusion, the equity piece is key, and it's even what Natasha said. So it doesn't matter what level you're working in, everyone has a voice, and everyone feels safe in giving their input and knowing that their input is going to be a part of the team. So when we look at diversity and inclusion, it really is about safe working environments. And it really is about making sure everyone feels valued for being there. And so, when you walk into an establishment and the front of house feels comfortable and acknowledged and respected in their own space, it when the back of house feels comfortable and respected in their space, because it shows up in the quality of the service. And so again, it's DE and I are really about respect for everyone, no matter what position that you're in. And allowing the safety of each employee to be free, to be authentic. I can't believe you said spicy, because that is just, oh my God, I want to pull all my curls out on that one. But to feel so safe and to feel so authentic in who they are, that they don't have to be someone else, or they don't have to dim their own light in order to blend in and go with the rules of the establishment. And so really, a bar when you walk in, when it's great, the vibe, the energy is just right. And when it's off, and when the front of house is not communicating with the back of the house, when the language becomes such a barrier, and that the bartenders are frustrated with the dishwashers and with the bar backs because there's no communication happening. So you want a great bar space, want a great organization, respect your employees. Simple.
There was a lot of that. I thank you for that, and I agree. I'm a big energy person, and I think sometimes when we do put that out there, sometimes people say, "What do you mean by that?" And I was like, you don't just feel it when you walk in. No, okay.
The energy, I'm so happy and so proud of what we're doing at the restaurant and bar that I work at. I've never felt so comfortable in my own skin and to be who I am, and feel like my Latina dad it's something to be so proud of. Like for a long time I had to whitewash myself, because I was working in bars and restaurants where there were things where I had to learn how to pronounce so I sounded less Latina, and it was a nightmare. And now it's just like I speak Spanish most of the time, and it feels so good. It feels so good.
there's something about expression in a language that is your first language that is very hard to grasp in languages that are your second language. As someone who speaks three, like I sort of speaks three, right? It's so difficult to express what I express in English as my first language, right? And I can't imagine being in a work environment where, you know, I was expected to perform. So thank you for sharing that, because I'll never understand that, but I think knowing, like, being able to listen to that, that experience is really valuable for me and for hopefully other people like me who are here watching. If there were, I know we talked about behind the bar, we talked about in front of the bar, we talked about that energy. So does anyone want to identify some of the, some of maybe the red flags or really sort of big things that maybe we've missed in the hospitality industry as a whole? I think maybe we've already touched on this, but how we kind of a lot of that at Diversity Distilled in terms of looking at the 30,000 foot view and looking at what structures maybe that are missing, and what we can rebuild. But if anybody has any specific insight into that, or, you know, just something it triggered in your brain, I'd love to hear you guys just talk at me about that.
That's Joe.
So, I mean, again, this is the thing that people need to understand is that, like, panels are cute, cocktail conventions are cute, social media discussions are cute. If you say, I want to make my corner of the hospitality world a safer place for all people of all gender identities, all ethnic backgrounds, all financial standings, all immigration standings, you have then committed to a lifetime of work of dismantling a system that you have profited off of. Because race, language, labor, like, the hospitality industry is the OG exploiter, except for maybe agriculture, of bodies and people of color. And the very things that are special and powerful about individuals of color are weaponized against them. So, like, cute words and everything, and, like, you know, in the art spaces as well, in addition to, like, you know, seeing what brands are doing, a lot of people are putting out statements of diversity and inclusion, and, you know, we're going to be better, we're going to do better. That's all fucking words. I will be the first person to curse on this panel. That's all fucking words. Words don't do anything if you don't walk the walk. And walking the walk in this sense requires a literal full internal examination of yourself and your biases and your privileges, because we're all biased and we're all privileged in some way. There are many of us who are more privileged and potentially more biased than others. And if you are not, as an individual, doing that constant daily moment-to-moment self-examination of, did I just say something or experience something or witness something that was potentially harmful to someone else or erasive of someone else's identity and value and sense of self-worth, if you're not doing that examination, and if you are not falling into bed tired at the end of every day because you have done that work on yourself and then brought it to your workplace, you are not doing it. And that's it. And I personally, and maybe it's because I straddle two very crazy industries between hospitality and the arts, I know that myself and a lot of other people of color that I'm speaking with are sitting back and waiting for the other shoe to drop. From every single brand that's put out a statement, every single large restaurant group that's put out a statement, like, words are cool. I know there's a massive, very well-known hospitality group right now that is trying to rev up its inclusion training, and they're already dropping the ball. And because the people at the top, the white people at the top, are not doing the self-examination. You have committed to a lifetime of this work. Every single one of us. That means you are going to allow yourself to be checked. You are going to listen to hear, not to respond, not to defend. And when somebody harms you, you need to understand that that takes bravery for them to say, hey, you harmed me. I'm just trying to do my job. Our job is to protect each other. The hospitality community, we always talk a lot about, oh, we're a family and all this stuff. That's bullshit. That's bullshit. Because I watch people of color and women get kicked to the curb and get abused, and nobody stands up for it. So, this is obviously a wide-reaching thing, but like it starts with the self-examination at the core of who we are and what we bring to our work. That's where it starts.
But Joanna, it's exhausting. I don't want to think about race every day. I don't want to think about my fellow female employees or my, if there's equity for my LGBTQ. I don't want to think about the letters. What do I do?
Get the fuck out of the industry. That's what you do. Sorry. Hospitality, we are a home for so many misfits. We are a home for our guests. We are a home for our young up-and-coming talent that deserves to be nurtured and cared for and empowered. And I'm sorry, there's a lot of folks who are very clearly not willing to do this work. You gotta go, because there's a whole bunch of talent that is ready to change this industry on a global scale for the better, and we are all going to be better for it. I am so much better for having somebody put my ass in my place when I have said something harmful, because that allows for healing. It allows for learning and for growth. So if you don't want to learn the letters, I don't know what to tell you. Like, I don't know, find the Google. Jordan, you asked me to be here, and I'm just saying, if you have
I'm not sorry. And as someone who continues to hopefully learn from friends of color, and I usually do it very publicly on social media, like people see me do it, because I often think that a couple of things. One, white people do not know how to deal with shame, right? They feel that they are being shamed. There's a difference between feeling shame and harnessing it and then sitting in the shame, right? And I think that taking everything as shame is like, you need to go to some therapy and work on that, because someone standing up for themselves is not shaming you. Someone standing up for themselves is doing what you get to do every day by being born the color that you were, right? So I think there's that shame piece. I think there's also a piece that I found very helpful for someone who might have the privilege that I have, which is there's a book. There's a book, guys. There's more books to learn from. Don't worry, it's not all the race books that you already should have read by now. I'm looking at you. Anyway, and the workbooks. Do the workbooks too. If the workbook, you haven't done the workbooks, you haven't read the book, read it again. But there is there's a great book by Harriet Lerner. Yes, she was a white Jewish woman. Harriet Lerner, and it's let me remind myself of the title. It's Why Won't You Apologize? And it's basically 5 steps of how to apologize, and it has taught me a lot about receiving those types of corrections. And you may have really hurt someone's feelings. It doesn't matter if they look hurt or if they are just correcting you. This is not about you at this moment. It's really about learning how to properly apologize. And if that person doesn't want to hear it, it doesn't matter, because this is about you feeling better, right? This is about you're making a statement of, thank you for that criticism, I'm going to move forward. So I think there's a lot of work that we have to do if we say, I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to deal with all these things. They're very hard, right? If we can move on to, I can learn to stand there and take it and accept it without immediate regurgitation of something else, then I think that we've moved somewhere. But I would say those are 2 things that have helped me. And I know that Pam Wisnitzer was on a panel with us yesterday, and she did a great piece on how to manage negative PR, which is not the same as this, but I loved her thing about don't read the comments and don't respond for 24 hours. Like, take it in, like take someone's, actually, I think you should respond immediately if you offend someone, but, take it in, understand why you feel the shame that you do, because that's a powerful feeling and it's there for a reason, right? Okay.
I just want to say one more thing on the subject. There's trauma that everyone needs to address. So whether you're oppressed or you are the oppressor, that trauma is you're still affected by it. And so, yes, you might feel ashamed, and it's okay. It may not be your fault. It may be generational, but we all have to live in it, and we all have to accept it. And so we all do need to go ahead and get the help, get the therapy we need in order to address the trauma of all the things that led us to this moment today. So like 2020, as you know, I was just in a seminar with Jackie about building a new table. And I think how he started the seminar was flipping the table. Like 2020 is the year where the table has just been flipped over. Like, fuck it. Like that's 2020 in a nutshell. That's the universe of 2020 saying like, all of this has to end. And a number of a number of topics, individually, personally, societally, nationally, internationally. Like this is just a year of flip it all up and just fuck it. So we all have trauma. Like nobody is in an upper hand in 2020. Go get some help. Go address that issue. Deal with the shame. Deal with the grief. Like this is a year where we all have to throw everything out on the table and get the help that we need so that we can move forward and be a diverse, healthy society. Like that's the only way we're going to survive this year in particular, but we have to be healthy.
I love that. And when we think of, pathways forward, some of it's paved by time, right? And that's a privilege to have. Some of it's paved by money, which I think, of course, is a privilege to have. And when I think of time to create and the money to create spaces, I think of brands and suppliers. I would be interested to know from each of you, what do you wish brands and suppliers would know about this topic or would do differently? I know we said just act, and I think we are absolutely capable of leaving it at that. But is there anything specific you think like suppliers and brands just like aren't quite getting or need to come to the conversation to explore more? I'd be interested to know what you think about that.
For me, is admit it. And I think we have had, especially leading up to the black tile situation that Joanna mentioned, with the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery, all of these social justice issues happening. We had a lot of brands completely turn their eye as if nothing happened. And they turn their back on society. They turn their back on consumers. And they just pretended like it didn't happen. They didn't want to get involved. And so they ignored it and kept doing business as usual. But that really does speak to the internal work that the brands need to do. The brands weren't even addressing the diverse staff that they have that was grieving and dealing with all of these issues in their cities across the country. People can't leave their houses because there's protests and there's demonstrations. You're in Louisville. I'm sorry, I'm about to call you Joanna. Jordan, your Lord had a break, but they are expecting demonstrations to happen. And so, these companies need to be aware that we are all human beings and we're all dealing with these in our individual lives, but it also affects our work and the way that we do business for these companies. So the brands just need to admit what's going on. They need to join in and become a part of the conversation and really tune in to what their staff is experiencing. When you can admit that and you can say, okay, we admit that there's an issue societally and internally within our company, and we don't have a clue how to get started, that's the best place to start. Admit that you have the issue, and then we can figure out how to fix it.
I want to know what Natasha thinks because she's behind the bar.
I there's a lot of free work being done by people of color and women and queer people for brands. A lot of free work, but I see I don't see reps that come to my bar that can completely connect with me and kind of relate with what's happening. And yet we're still getting calls that oh my God, you're a woman, you're Latina, we want you to rep this brand, we just wanted to do this post. And I'm like, but what do you really stand for? And when I ask you that, I want you to tell me what we all want to hear, that you are not just here to ask me for a free job and that your rep is doing their part in the community, and that you're doing their part in the community, and that your vice president is a person of color, and not just the faces that you're putting in social media, which again, they're technically free because you're using all of our ideas for like years and years and years and not getting paid enough for it.
But not only that, they're using your face and your likeness.
Exactly. So I think there's a lot of work to do still. I've seen a lot of brands have people of color working for Latin brands or different brands in general, which is great. But what about those brands that like, let's say, I don't know, Irish bands? I want to see more people of color repping those bands. I don't want to see another white cis man walk in my bar and be like, what do you know about whiskey? It's like, I don't want to see that anymore, and this is the time. There's so many people that are unemployed, great bartenders, great servers, great sommeliers, great spirit specialists that need jobs. And instead of waiting for people to go look for you, because again, we're all grieving, maybe as a brand, you should reach out to them and be like, hey, I've heard great things about you as a bartender, and I think you'll be great for this position. Let's try it out. Like, I think there's a lot of good opportunities for brands to do the right work. And if you're not doing it, it's because you don't want to do it. That's what I thought.
Thank you. And I think, too, as someone representing a brand, a couple things. So I'm just going to leave that sentence. And I will also say that I think if we haven't gotten on board, if people running advocacy programs haven't gotten on board that we don't ask people of color for free labor anymore, that door is closed.
Yes.
Then I think it's time to reevaluate who is running those programs, because that door is closed, right? PR is nice, pay me. And I think, brands do, small brands maybe don't have the money, and maybe you do it ordinary. Brands who are sponsoring these kind of seminars here at Tails, who have the money to do these sorts of activations, also have the money to make sure that they are compensating you for your knowledge and your likeness, and putting your name next to ours. So thank you for that. My company's on board with my saying that. But no, they are. I'm kidding. I thank you for that, because that's, yeah. I will ask this question because I just said that, and then I'm going to just ask this question and let y'all go at me. And I think, we talk what companies can do. One of the questions we put down was actually, what can historically privileged groups like, a white person like myself, or a cis white man, in a different space do to be better allies to people in the hospitality industry? We're all here. We love this industry. We're here for a reason. What can we do to be better? And I know that, and we went over these questions before, by the way, everyone watching, if you're like, you just told them they can't do labor and you're asking them for book recommendations. It's not the book recommendations, I swear, promise. Things maybe we can't Google, or something you just really want to, offer up to your friends in the industry to do better. Would love to know.
Oh yeah. What I would love to see from white people is an understanding of the cost of what it is to speak and exist as a person of color, most especially a Black person, most especially a trans person of color, a queer person of color. We're not in a competition to see who's suffered the most, but like there is a spectrum of suffering. And at the end of the day, you can have the best of intentions. And Jordan, you and I have spoken about this. You can have the best of intentions to say, I need to learn and I need to understand. You are my friend. I care deeply about you. What am I missing here? There is nothing inherently wrong with that question, because I think it's important to have people in your world who you can ask questions of, who can teach you things. And it's a safe space for you to fuck up and for you to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, take notes for the next go round, right? However, in general, what I'm finding, especially since Black Lives Matter has erupted this year, and thank goodness for it, and it's really unfortunate that it has taken what it has taken to get to this point. What I'm finding is that a lot of white people will perpetuate the cycle of taking from people of color, and they don't have an ability to give back because they are taking information. They are consuming trauma. They are consuming histories of pain. They are consuming fear and anguish and legacy in all its forms in an attempt to be better. And I think we need to question everything. I think we should never take anything at face value. And that goes from clickbait headlines to one conversation you have with one person of color, because none of us are monoliths, but people must understand that there is a cost. When somebody calls me and says, hey, I think I screwed up in this conversation. Can I run this by you and get your perspective on it? I am 100% going to show up for my friends. Absolutely. But I need my friends to understand that that is costing me emotional capital that is already running thin because we are experiencing a global pandemic and I have watched my world crumble around me. So I'm going to show up for you, but it's going to cost me. And I'm going to love you dearly, and I'm going to be honest, and I'm going to support you in your journey and your evolution, but it's going to cost me. And there is still such a gap in that empathy between white people and their colleagues of color. There's such a lack of understanding of just how much it costs us to do this work. And a lot of us want to do this work, constantly planting yourself, like Samara's companies, like you plant yourself in spaces where you're often having to revisit trauma and you're having to disseminate it and explain it and distill it down into sound bites so that people can consume it. That's exhausting. And it takes an emotional toll. So like, and then we have to, there's just so much emotional labor involved. So like, if you want to be part of this conversation, if you want to be part of this evolution and be a leader in your own corner of the universe, you have to understand how much you are charging someone in emotional capital.
I needed to hear that. I needed to hear that. And you're absolutely right. Again, going back to, but it's so exhausting. You're telling me, you're shaming me and all this stuff. Well, it's exhausting to be a Black woman in 2020. It's exhausting to have to explain to my children why there are helicopters around here, or people, protesting in front of our house every weekend. So you're absolutely right. And the thing that I think that keeps us all going in this industry and creating your organization and just doing and being leaders and showing up in this industry, being present, is the fact that we're so passionate about it. And so that's what, that's also the cost of being a leader, is that, we are willing to sacrifice so that we can lead us out of this shit. If I'm going to cuss too, so that we can lead us all out of this mess. Like, we have to make a difference. And so, but you're absolutely right. And so thank you for speaking, because, that's the shift that we're in now. I put it in the comments that, for the first 6 months of the pandemic, we did a lot of free labor for the brands and for the industry. And even for my members, just because we wanted to keep everyone together. Our world was crumbling. Information was different day to day. People were dying left and right. So as a way to just keep community together for Black Urban Society, we produced a lot of content with the brands for free, just to keep everyone together. But now that we're not in crisis mode and we just have to learn to live in a pandemic, now that shift has to happen. It does cost. There is capital, in providing content, for keeping the glue together, for promoting brands. And we are the only way that brands can really reach consumers, especially consumers of color, is through digital media. So we have to charge for that now. And I don't know if they can afford exactly what I'm worth, but I'll take whatever they have.
That's good. Okay. Well, we'll figure out that. There's a couple of questions in the chat. I think some people have some really interesting things to say as we go through, and I think I was so engrossed that I was not managing that appropriately. So I'm going to jump over here. Jared asked, it's always a journey, but do you feel there are organizations that are doing it well? I'm going to extrapolate on his questions. It could be in or out of the hospitality industry. Anything that like actually said, man, someone did good on you, And if the answer is no, then the answer is no. But I'd be interested to know if there's anything that was kind of inspirational or caught you off guard for how decent it felt.
I personally think it goes beyond what we see on the surface. And the problem is we're all physically siloed. So a lot of ways that we are connecting, Ben and Jerry's 14. I think, we are consuming digital information in a different way, in a borderline unhealthy way these days, because it is our only human contact for a lot of us. I tend to try and dig beyond, and this is just me personally, I'm not telling anyone to do this, but I tend to dig beyond the surface of like somebody's Instagram or, somebody's Facebook post or like a press release or a campaign or whatever. And I want to know who's working at high levels on that team. And Jordan, with all due respect to Brown-Forman, I'm a big fan of Mezcal Silencio and what Silencio is doing, because not only do I have a great relationship with their team, but they are probably one of the most diverse teams I've seen in the industry. And they're not diverse for the sake of being diverse, like from the top down. You can tell their ethos also aligns with their optics. But I mean, they're the first one that springs to mind, the only one, who's cutting the checks? That's what I want to know. Who's cutting the fucking checks? And that goes for media outlets, that goes for booze brands, that goes for large hospitality groups, that goes for, your smaller groups. But that's just me personally. I see a lot of people posturing. I don't see a lot of people changing leadership and ceding power.
Another question we had here was, how do we increase language access, and what resources would you recommend to help us as managers make sure that we are communicating our messages, procedures, benefits to all of our staff, including those whose first language is not English? I like this question.
Yeah. Well. What do you laugh here? Well, 86 the barrier. Thank you, whoever asked that question, because what we have discovered is that, like, we always know that there, especially when it comes to Spanish to English, we know that there is a language gap, and we know that there is a power gap, and we also subliminally all know that there is nothing's being done to remedy that. It's just the way it is, right? And as we know, hospitality as an industry is built on exploited immigrant labor. So like, why would you give people resources to grow professionally if that means you can't exploit them anymore? That's some colonizer activity right there. So what 86 the Barrier is, our mission statement is literally to decolonize language in hospitality so that all workers, regardless of background, have equal access to professional growth and financial independence, because language is knowledge, is power, is money. And there has to be a reciprocal conversation. So right now, our existing program is English as a new language, and we built this specifically for our Spanish-speaking colleagues in order to get them into one-on-one meetings with bilingual peers to get a stronger facility with English that will help them like navigate interviews in a very oversaturated job market after New York City loses 30 to 40% of its restaurants and bars, because that's where we're at. And it's like, imagine what it's like. And Natasha, I was thinking of you because like what it's like to stand in your integrity and your power and your pride as a Latinx person who does not have English as a first language, but you can talk about who you are, what you are seeking, how much money you want to make, where you want to go, like what you need. So many people do not have that, and they are just constantly pushed down by these like cis white managers who are not going to invest in them. So we're also creating, we're in the midst of creating parallel programming that is Spanish as a new language. And that's going to be for all my Spanish speakers across the industry, because there's nothing wrong with people who don't speak English as a first language. We need to meet each other in the middle. If I am not at least semi-fluent in Spanish and I am running a program and there are Spanish-speaking folks who work for me, how dare I not meet them linguistically where they are? How dare I? And this is just that I could go on, but there needs to be reciprocity. The programming exists. 86 The Barrier was built literally for this thing as a COVID response that we are now, we're going to be like doing some crazy partnering with people to be announced. But language is a weapon, and language is the first barrier to entry. And language is used as a weapon against the very people who deserve the most to thrive, the very people who are lowest on the financial totem pole because they're not able to access government benefits. Like, we got to be better. We got to be so much better linguistically, culturally. We just got to be better. So.
I'm also looking at this panel right now, and I asked that question, and then I'm hearing you speak, and I'm looking at you, Natasha, and part of my answer wants to be put someone in a leadership position like you, right? Because you can communicate. I had this vision of you communicating with your staff with ease in a way that a cis white man would not ever be able to, because as you just sort of alluded to, Joanna, if you're functioning in a major city, most likely, I mean, really anywhere, like you're going to have, you're probably going to have that racial divide. You're going to have some language barriers. And one of the best ways that I could see to solve that is to put people with multiple language abilities in those positions of power in order to really make that difference. I think that,
that's equity. That's leveling the field. And again, that's doing the work. We all have work to do. And so we want our Spanish employees to speak English. We also have to make that olive branch and learn how to meet them halfway, like you said. That's real equity. That's what real inclusion looks like. Everyone is invested.
Yeah. And even starting that work requires the internal examination of hearing Natasha's accent, for example, and acknowledging the fact that in a white racist society, we are taught that anybody with an accent is automatically dumb. And if we don't call that shit out, you're not going to fix it. You're not going to assume that Natasha has the leadership skills and the talent she does. Yeah. Because the bias that we've all been born with serves as a barrier. So we need to that first and foremost. What is your language bias? What is your accent bias?
Yeah.
And if you acknowledge that, you're not really understanding what Samara's talking about.
Literally makes you smarter. Just saying. Makes you smarter. But I do appreciate all the support, and I think I appreciate all. Obviously I want to give all the tools to everybody that does not speak English, because I have to learn how to pause myself and how to speak so fast and kind of process my thought before I actually speak, so that way it makes more sense. Well, how about the other way around? How about you learn a little Spanish? You have Spanish ingredients behind your bar, Spanish ingredients in your kitchen. Why don't you know Spanish? A little bit.
And I think that, what white people should probably listen. Well, we should probably get on board a lot of this. But one thing I want to encourage my white friends about is, being new to something and being bad at something are totally different things, right? And being new to something is a beginning. What we're talking about right now is flipping over the table and starting over, because that's the point where we're at. We are at an end and we are at a beginning, and we have the opportunity to begin in a new way. Being new to something is admirable. Trying something is admirable. I think a lot of the thread throughout this conversation is people in positions of power need to try, right? We can't rely on you for all the information first and then just wait and try to process it. It's time for action, and it's time for doing, and it's time for starting something. We have about 5 minutes left, and I think there's some great comments in the thread, but I'm gonna end. I'm gonna ask you for one more thing in this session, just because I think there's a lot of energy and a lot of passion. But Samara, actually, the first time we met, one of the things she said to me was, Jordan, a person either comes from a place of love or fear, and I'll never forget that. And you said a person either comes from a place of love or fear. And so coming from your place of love right now, for each of you, I'd want to ask, what's giving you hope? What's making you feel love, and what's giving you hope in this space?
I'll go.
Natasha.
Things like this, just, taking that first step and giving a lot of us the platform to speak our mind and to express ourselves, and just reaching out. I've had many text messages, many Instagram messages from people that were just passing by in the industry and have actually reached out to see how we're doing, how's everybody doing, how our bars and restaurants and brands are doing. And I think it's very important, this community. We do have a very strong community. I'm very proud to be part of this industry. And just doing this work and, taking the time to listen to your queer friends, your Black friends, your Hispanic friends, your Latino friends, your Asian friends, take the time to listen to us, because we are going through a lot, all of us, but we already have a lot of trauma that we've been dealing with from before. So sometimes you think you're doing bad, the friend next to you is probably doing a lot worse, and we just need each other right now.
Yeah. Just really quickly, what gives me hope is definitely conversations like this. And, what a year for this to happen during Tales. It's like there's no parties, everybody's sober, it's all get out, having these amazing conversations. This never happens at Tales. So the fact that, we can really have, open, honest conversations like this, and everyone is listening. Like, I'm looking at the comments, and folks are asking for another hour, and we could all talk another 4 hours on this subject, but it really does give me hope that we are headed in the right direction. When we announced Diversity Distilled as an official thing, the industry immediately said, I want to work with you. I have to work with you. How do we work together? We know that we have issues, to the point where it was overwhelming for me. I couldn't even respond to all the inquiries all at once. So the hope is there. I just hope that the fear, you talk about love, right? So the love, I feel the love, I accept and I receive the love. The fear and the concern is that this is trending. And so that's when the real work comes in, to thank you for, expressing interest. Thank you for wanting to do the right thing in this moment. But in the next moment, I'm going to have to turn around and not be your friend and hold you accountable. So again, that's where my love and my passion for this industry comes in. And it's, like I said, I came to it as a consumer. And I absolutely love this industry. I have found my family. I found my home. I wouldn't trade y'all for any other industry or for anything I ever did in my past. I'm here, and y'all can get rid of me now. So.
Yeah, even when we need a little time out,
Love you.
And everything that has been said, I think if we had not experienced the global trauma of a pandemic, I don't think we would be in the position that we are in right now. And I think if we have the gift of our physical health and a roof over our heads and the ability to speak, then the ability to have these moments is what gives me hope. Seeing people take the gloves off and take the filters off gives me hope. And seeing people really showing up gives me hope.
Yeah.
Well, ladies, thank you. This was more than I could have asked for. And this isn't about me. This really is about your experience. Thank you for allowing me to put a megaphone to your mouth and amplify your experience and what you have to say. Thank you for forever teaching me as friends, new friends and old friends. And thank you for the work that you're doing and will continue to do. I'm sure I'm going to sit back in awe, as I already am. So thank you again. We appreciate your time, your emotional labor, and the space you've made for us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you.
Love
Thank
you,
you.
ladies.
Bye, everybody.
See you soon.